Are you a gamer? Or do you know a young person who's a gamer? My guess is that even if your answer's no to the first one, then your answer to the second question is definitely a yes. Advertising money and shock headlines set up an either-or debate where individuals consider themselves either gamers or non-gamers. Over the past few years, I've moved from a non-gamer tag to becoming an unlikely gamer. Both my teenage children are part of that online gaming community in a way that I could never have been at their age. More and more, I've become convinced that if we're going to make progress in engaging with a significant part of the teenage population in the Western world, we need to explore and participate in the world of video games. Those of you who said you weren't gamers, have you ever played a game on your phone? A game at youth club with young people? If you're a youth worker or a children's worker, most probably yes. My transition began from the realisation that video games are no longer purely the pursuit of teenagers in bedrooms. From bumping into parents with their children playing Pokemon Go in the park, through to politicians getting into trouble for passing boring committee meetings, playing Candy Crush on their phone. Gaming is as diverse and accessible in so many different places. I've been the youth worker many a time who's set up game consoles at hundreds of youth clubs and sessions and events. But there's always been a distance between myself and full engagement. I've had some principles which I thought were important when choosing games for young people, and they had to be the right age certificate. Not involving guns, I wasn't mad on them. I always wanted them to be more than one single player so that there was an interaction and a focal point for conversation. And I intended that video games would give an opportunity to build relationships through that act of playing together. But I'd not considered how the nature of the game being played itself could be transformational. Games like FIFA, Mario Kart, and Guitar Hero, they were fun to play with young people. They were a vehicle to build a relationship, but they were not deep-rooted or thought-provoking messages contained within them, within that act and the narrative of playing. They were, and remain, good entertainment value. But when engaging with young people, I've discovered that the medium of gameplay can become the message when explored and reflected upon appropriately. Gaming has also a reputation for being about shooting people in the head, and not much else, but I've discovered a wealth and diversity of games, rich in meaning and about different topics worthwhile of engaging young people in dialogue around. I watched a TED video about an approach to sustainable video games by Andy Robertson, and I've since been fortunate to get to know him at the Greenbelt Festival and then work with him in helping to facilitate spaces for young people to explore meaning and spirituality within video games. We've recently written a Grove Youth Series booklet together, and in the next few minutes I hope to share with you some of the learning from that, but also with particular reference to how we as youth workers can help young people explore those video games and those spaces to consider how meaning and spirituality can be found within that context. The first video game I recall playing as a child was Pac-Man. I remember clearly that when I ate the fruit, the ghosts who were the hunters, they became the hunted, and my little apple yellow-shaped face was kind of chasing after them. How many young people in their journey through life move through times of vulnerability and then at times exploit or struggle with the nature of their own power as they shift in roles? In the same way that Jesus challenged those who brought the woman in adultery in John 8, highlighting their power and actions, contrasting their purity and their ability to pass judgment. I'm not advocating turning every game into a spiritual homily designed to pad out a rushed sermon. Rather, this is about the process of how a mutual informal education process can teach us and young people as we learn together through our experiences. Games offer a new space which feelings and real life can combine with the potential for a deeper spirituality. In another Grove booklet, Sally Nash and Nigel Pimlott address the issue of building spiritual resilience within young people. They argue that while it is tempting to view them as passive consumers of the world that they live in, instead to use the perspective that they are active members of that world. I've set up lots of opportunities to play meaningful games with young people. In the youth club at my church, where I'm a volunteer leader, at large events and also through training. I wanted to see how it was possible to engage young people in a deeper conversation around the games that they were playing. As a result, I can see we can approach gaming with young people in the same way and help build their capacity to mine deeper meaning from the interactions they have on screen. We can encourage young people to ask questions and develop their critical thinking when reflecting on games. This not only creates higher expectations of the games they play to be more than just entertainment, but develops that language to describe their experiences that will be useful for skills for all areas of their lives. We will also find ourselves learning about the new medium of video games with them and potentially uncover new ways to encounter God ourselves. So try asking these questions about gaming with the young people you work with. What's your favourite video game and why? Why was it an enjoyable game to play? What was engaging about the story? Were there any surprises or plot twists or shocks? And have they finished the game yet? And if they have, what did it feel like to reach the end and maybe beat the big boss? If you like, you can pause this video here and do this exercise yourself and make a list of all of the games that you're aware of, especially those played by the young people that you know. So try playing this game, Run Jesus Run. You can find it easily online. It's a very light-hearted take on the gospel in just 10 seconds, where you have to do Jesus-type things. You have to turn your back on the devil, for example, heal the sick, walk on water, and see how many apostles you can attract in a very short space of time. A far deeper game, and one that I've used a lot with young people, is called Passage. Again, it's a simple game that can be downloaded to a PC, which initially looks broken or compressed. The screen looks a bit weird when you're playing it. But as you explore that 5-minute game repeatedly, different journeys and different routes are discovered within that gameplay. And I found that young people quickly turn their discussion to questions of life and death and the value of relationships and loneliness as the game progresses. Andy Robertson, during his experimentation with gaming, took video games to a cathedral Eucharist service, and he explored how they might fit in, games like Flower or Journey. It's true that anyone can play a game in a service, but that's just missing the point. For years, people have used games as an entertainment, but hopefully, as you watch this video, you'll begin to understand ways of seeking to find deeper meaning in the experience with young people. But without a wide knowledge of games that possess these themes, how do you go about finding experiences that are suitable for such exploration, or that might provoke dialogue and glimpses of the kingdom? Well, it will take some commitment, hopefully, but not loads. If you're not a regular gamer, or there's not someone who's a regular gamer as part of your team, it's important to develop an authentic understanding of gaming when working with young people. It will take some time investment though. With about 50 hours of gaming, we believe someone could have completed several shorter games, maybe of about 2 to 3 hours, and maybe a longer game as well of 24-hour gameplay. I approach video games in this way and found that although I was not a regular gamer, I could reach this level over a few weeks. It meant I discovered games for myself and developed both an authentic understanding of the spaces they create and a sense of what those spaces meant for me personally. When playing games together with young people, a dynamic opportunity is created to experience the world that they inhabit, and by doing so, learn about their worldview within that space. When curating a game space with young people, be intentional and focus on drawing out the learning, as that will affect the number of opportunities that present themselves. But at the same time, be ready to go with, rather than against, the surprises that sharing a video game world might inevitably throw up. However the time unfolds, asking questions about the decisions they make along that way within the game, it could be the difference in making a meaningful experience or simply just another game for entertainment. In particular, addressing a video game as being about something or of substantial value will set the tone of both the experience and the subsequent conversations that you have. There is a resource available that accompanies this video with some suggested guidelines for ensuring safeguarding during this work. Along with the usual precautions, it's important to understand and take the PEGI age rating seriously, as well as have played through the game in advance of its use with the group. The Video Game Standards Council rate every game sold in UK shops, and details can be found on their website as well. So how do we start talking about video games? When playing through games as a group, we felt an important factor was that all the young people were given an opportunity to participate, but not forced to. Generally, we made it possible for all the young people in a group to have the opportunity to take part. Accommodating individuals with disabilities should also be considered. Where these make it hard for young people to control a game, it's worth talking to an organisation called Special Effect. They're a UK charity who are experts in ensuring that everyone can access and enjoy all video games, no matter what the disability or hurdle. In a training context for leaders, we found usually that some were really engaged with the games, while others were more happy just to observe. When in bigger groups and having a large enough screen, making sure that the image is adequately visible. Turning on subtitles and providing amplification for sound, they're also important factors when playing through any game. But don't intervene. As games are being played, try not to guide or direct the players, but instead let them explore and draw on their own experience to interpret what's happening. During the early example of Passage, we found that just encouraging a player to move up and down and asking questions such as, what happened then? Or what do you think is happening as the man aged? What do you think the numbers were at the bottom of the screen? Why do you think it's called Passage? We found all those questions were helpful. These sorts of open questions related to the specific game being played. It's helpful not to critique the playing of the game, but just inquire as the story is being experienced. The approach that we did was found it yielded all sorts of interesting responses. All of the games mentioned so far provide the opportunity to seek what we've called a shalom space within them. When we talk about finding space and trying to encounter shalom in games, we believe that we can make room to hear God and find ways to feel and sense the kingdom of God within a game. That could be through the fruits of the Spirit, moments of grace, or the way that we learn about ourselves, the world, and its creator. When playing through these games with young people, we felt that it was important to get the group to reflect on the game and capture their feelings, thinking about what they learnt through playing the game together and asking them to explain what they thought we could learn from the game as we discussed and explored that game space. At other times, we found the game had created a space that the group valued but couldn't clearly explain, particularly when it had been emotional. Similar to how encounters in a traditional church services can't always be defined, or how gazing at a painting doesn't always have clear implications. Embracing those mysterious benefits of game spaces is also important. When I was working with young people at my church, we had an interactive debrief session after each long game with a flip chart, with sticky notes and creative ways of feeding back their experiences, such as picture cards or magazines, or so they could cut out suitable pictures to express how they felt, what they discovered about themselves, and the subject of the game being played. When we reached the end of a game, the group often asked what game they'd be playing together next. And that was a strong sign, I thought, that they had enjoyed the process of playing together, and not just in the way that they might normally experience a game at home. It's hard to say which games will be interesting for your group until they're played, but typically, the games that we found useful have had at least one or more characters, novel ways of navigating around the landscape, or unusual matter. They're also popular choices for us. A narrative that touches on issues that are relevant for young people, for example, around self-esteem, or parents, or mental health, or even childhood abandonment. They're also good places to start in games. Spending time researching and playing potentially interesting games for your groups is an essential work. It's good to ask young people for suggestions of what to play, but caution here is suggested as they tend to go towards the popular and the mainstream titles. Your work finding video games will likely start by Googling particular topics and video games, but will inevitably require thoughtful time spent playing lots of different games before a strong candidate is found. Here are some suggestions for playing games meaningfully with young people. First of all, set up an environment where everyone can participate and see. Make it clear right from the start of the game that the game is going to be explored together and that we'll be discussing it while we play. Ask open-ended questions about feelings, their choices and experiences. Allow the players to play the game their own way, rather than having to win. Discourage others suggesting that they're making mistakes in the game. Only intervene as a last resort, and make sure that you've played the game through first. And finally, make sure you choose a game that's suitable to the age range that you're going to be playing it with, such as from the PEGI rating. So let's look at something called Kolb's Learning Cycle, which we've readapted to work with video games. As a youth worker and someone who's passionate about learning and development, I've adapted this image to relate to video games. First of all, young people play a game and have an experience. And it usually stops there for most young people and most games. But now think, how can I help and facilitate the young people to reflect on that experience and to learn from it? And what do they and what do I observe? Now begin to put some words to that. What does it mean, and what concepts might the game help describe or bring more insight to? Finally, how can they experiment and play with those thoughts together and with us as leaders? And what are they bringing back to the game the next time that they play it? And perhaps more importantly, what might they hold on to and take with them into their everyday, non-gaming life? If you like, you can pause the video and reflect upon an experience that you've had, either gaming or when you were moved by another piece of art or music. Showing a willingness to engage in the world other than our own frame of reference is a good starting point of much good youth work. When we can build and trust and learn further about what's important for young people as we seek to understand the spaces that they inhabit. In the same way that detached work joins young people in their space rather than inviting them to come into our regulated space, games allow us to share an important space for young people and to learn from them. By being attentive to these experiences, we earn the right to discuss our own learning through exploring the learning of others. It becomes a dialogue instead of a monologue. Rather than highlighting the dangers of video games, this process is designed to help us pull out some of those moralities and relationships that exist within the world of gaming. And whether people are Christians or not, they're able to explore that relationship and ways of interacting with each other that make a real difference and help us as Christians to learn more about ourselves and help the young people too to learn more in that space. This isn't to minimise the pitfalls of gaming. They often glamorise violence and they use it to make the player feel powerful. They can absorb a huge amount of time if you've got an addictive nature or personality, and they also don't really encourage physical activity. And they can be expensive as well if you focus solely on the high-end and Hollywood experiences. However, in the same way that violence is in the Bible, especially the Old Testament, that doesn't eclipse its value. We suggest that the games aren't cancelled out by their jarring habit of getting players to shoot each other in the head. Equally, provided that we've got a varied diet of gaming, they can be a healthy part of an active imagination and lifestyle. These risks are worth it. To not grasp that nettle is to do a disservice not only to the young people who see games as a natural part of life, but also to the huge amount of God-given creativity that is invested in thousands of games every year. Spirituality in video games is not the golden bullet of mission to reach all young people. However, as a community of Christians, we can no longer ignore the opportunity of helping young people experience that kingdom and the shalom as they play games containing meaning. As part of the resources accompanying this video, there's lots more example games for you to explore. And video games may be new to you, but I believe the spaces that they create can benefit the young people in all sorts of ways. Admittedly, developing this work takes time and commitment, particularly if you're new to gaming, just like I was. Video games require a new kind of literacy that, like any new language, isn't trivial to learn. But if you allow yourself 50 hours or more, as we've suggested, video games require a kind of new kind of literacy. Like any other new language, it isn't trivial to learn. But if you allow yourself 50 hours or more, as we've suggested, you'll go a long way to engaging in the world of video games, enough to relate to young people. It may take a while to become familiar navigating video games controlled by unfamiliar devices. Games are also developing rapidly with augmented reality like Pokemon Go and virtual reality such as the Oculus Rift, adding further challenges and opportunities. Don't be put off though. With the approach that we're suggesting, a little time and effort, the games can soon offer a range of unexpected benefits and rewards. Also, hopefully, they can become something that you investigate and play more. Throughout this video, I've shared a way of working with video games developed by Andy Robertson and myself, and I think there's loads more that we need to discover. I'm still on a huge learning curve myself. One way is to join a community and take part in something like a video games club. Don't be put off though. With the approach we're suggesting, and a little time and effort, games can soon offer a range of ways and unexpected benefits and rewards. Also, hopefully, they can become something that you investigate and play. I encourage you to let games be themselves rather than a sanitised subset of what they could be or an interactive version of other media. Rather than using video games a bit like a video clip, immerse yourself in the game and begin to work out ways in which the spirituality and the space that is created by those video games can help teach us and young people. I believe that this approach enables us to expect more of the games that we play. Rather than incorporating video games into our current liturgy, we start to see them as spaces where young people can discover and develop new ways of encountering God and exploring Christian spirituality. This framework enables us to engage in the rich breadth of video games on offer as an authentic part of young people's faith and our own. So some questions to reflect on. So when was the last time that you felt God's presence? When you experienced a film, a book, or a game? Is there a piece of art that's helped you reflect on your faith? And if so, what did it do differently from other works of art that helped you connect spiritually? Can you observe communities that your young people are around when they're video gaming? And what do those communities look like? And how might you introduce playing games intentionally with young people you work with that are about more than just entertainment? Who are the key young people that you work with who can teach you about gaming and learn from them? And are you or someone in your church willing to spend some time learning about video games and immersing yourself in that gaming culture?